Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Excuse the technical difficulty. My name is Jose de Rosario, Research Director for NSR. I'll be your moderator for today for our webinar entitled Successful Innovation in Government Service Delivery. We are joined by a very distinguished group of panelists, starting with my colleague, Brad Grady, who's Principal Analyst at NSR, Alvaro Sanchez, CEO of Integrasys, Victor Vega, Senior Director for Strategic Capabilities at Cubic. And last, of course, not the least, Alessandro Caranci, Senior Vice President for Satellite Communications for Telespacio. Welcome, gentlemen. To start us off, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Brad Grady, to give us the landscape for government military markets today and where he sees that going into the future. So Brad, please take it away.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Jose. It's a pleasure to be here. Let me share my screen. So like Jose mentioned, my name is Brad Grady. I'm a principal analyst here at Northern Sky Research. I focus on government military SATCOM as well as kind of the mobility market. So I have a foot in both the commercial side and the government side. Today we want to talk about a couple of things. I'm going to spend a few minutes just giving context around the size and shape of what the space economy looks like according to NSR, and insert some commentary of where government and military markets fit, size government and military markets directly, and kind of talk a little bit about what's driving some of this growth that we've been seeing over the next couple of years. Talk about some emerging technologies and just kind of things that we're seeing and observing in the SATCOM space and what those roles or potential impacts will be for government and military markets, and then wrap everything up, and then we'll get into a Q&A session. So over the next 10 years, from 2019 to kind of 2029, we see the satellite and space market cumulative revenues at just over $1 trillion. Now, 45% of that will be on kind of the infrastructure side, which is kind of building and launching satellites up into space, 45% in the satellite communications arena, and 10% in satellite and space applications. But overall, across all of these things, communications are really driving the revenue opportunities over the next 10 years. Meanwhile, there's a couple of other things that are going on. Per unit costs are generally declining and kind of take, find, replace whatever variable, whether or not you're talking about launch or satellites or bandwidth or whatever. On a per unit basis, costs are generally declining, which means the market is getting more and more accessible to more and more people. Technology is getting more complex, which is kind of our focus today. Where new orbits, new bands, new frequencies, new ways of operating, ConOps, all those other kinds of GovMil speaky kind of terms. And software defined is getting traction. So this is value-added services, networks as a service, virtualization, standardization, all of these other kinds of terrestrial type technologies are really coming full bore into the satellite and space markets. And overall, again, connectivity really does remain the largest use case for space-based infrastructure and services. So we all like to think about, Earth observation or launching people up into the, the International Space Station or the Moon or Mars or beyond or any of those other kinds of things. But in the vast majority of cases, the utilization of space really is involved in kind of connecting us here on Earth. And within that, we really want to start looking at what is the size and shape of the government and military markets. Now, today we're going to focus specifically on kind of the ComSatcom market. So this is a commercial satellite communications opportunity. There's most definitely a MilSatcom or a sovereign capabilities. And increasingly, we see that the value proposition is bridging those two networks together to create some unified network architecture, which is, again, I think, some of the themes that we'll talk about in the Q&A with the rest of the panelists here. But by 2029, we see in sort of our latest research about 219,000 in-service units across all frequency bands. So this goes from kind of this very small narrow band satellite handhelds, IoT, force tracking type applications to the very large non-geo applications that we see. But there's this ongoing migration to higher throughput offerings. So going from narrow band services to broadband type connectivity across all use cases. 7.7% annual revenue growth, again, driven by this multi-orbit, multi-band kind of paradigm or regime that's being introduced. 6.2% growth in wide beam FSS services and 50% growth in HGS. So that includes geo and non-geo. Again, this is just commercial capacity. This doesn't include kind of what the U.S. Space Force is launching or what partner nations for the US are launching. But non-geo HTS is a significant contributor to demand. There still remains a use case for FSS, which means networks are just getting more and more complex when you look at it from an end user basis, right? That UAV that's operating in the world is frequently going to be talking to multiple orbital regimes, multiple capacity types. That Air Force plane or the boots on the ground are really going to be interacting across a wide variety of network operations. Situational awareness, morale, welfare, recreation, MWR, ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, all of those kinds of applications are driving these bandwidth requirements, not only driving them in that there's increasing needs to generate that data, but there's increasing needs to distribute that data across the entire enterprise. Now, when we look at our evolution of market findings from the 16th edition of our report that was published in 2019 to the 17th edition that was published in 2020, to kind of ongoing opportunities, we do see two trends emerging. The base gets a little bit higher, and then that the total retail revenue growth starts to consolidate itself a little bit. Now, overall non-geo HTS adoption really does help boost the overall revenue growth, but overall, we do kind of still see this continued ramp rate growing over the future. There might be some challenges kind of in this midterm as we all start to think about how we're going to balance budgets and maybe troop deployments and repivots from Afghanistan to Iraq to the Middle East and away into Asia Pacific. Those might have changes and paradigm shifts, but overall the market does remain healthy from a revenue generation point. Now, this is, I think, one of the biggest kind of transformative aspects of what we see on the ComSatcom side of the market, so the commercial uptake for government and military services. About 41 gigabits a second of throughput in 2019 to 900 plus gigabits a second of throughput demand by 2029. And that number in every edition of our report that we've been publishing it in the 17 or 18 years that we've been doing it continues to grow. And we don't see any reason for that to change. So regardless of kind of price compressions and changes in kind of the revenue makeup, the demand for connectivity remains consistent. So over the next 5 years will be this transformative shift in capacity demand for government military markets, again, from that FSS wide beam kind of centric to geo HTS, so kind of geostationary spot beam capacity, to non-geo HTS orbits. And that's in LEO and MEO. This huge revolutionary change in how capacity is bought, provisioned, and deployed across the entire government and military enterprise. And now, what does that really mean? It's overall adding more complexity to network infrastructure on a per platform basis. Now, the good news is because of all of these changes in paradigms and the changing cost basis of commercial markets and how they're launching more capacity, the cost of orbit is getting cheaper, the amount of throughput per satellite is increasing. It does result in capacity pricing drop. So we see it as about a 3.5x drop in costs on a per platform basis. So kind of year over year and from 2019 to kind of 2028, 2029. If you look at the amount of capacity spent on a per megabit basis that a UAV or a maritime vessel or an Army Force Brigade kind of opportunities at sea, their cost per bit is lowering dramatically, which is enabling all the offsets that we're seeing in a lot of these new technology paradigms, because all magic comes with a price. But it really does change the paradigm in thinking of a total cost mindset, which is a new kind of concept really across the entire satellite space, where we think about highly tailored and highly complex ground infrastructure matched up with highly complex space infrastructure and a very complex kind of services orchestration layer that matches all of those kinds of things together. So it enables cost reduction through least cost of routing. That kind of offsets changes in terminal costs, because as you add complexity, terminal cost price does change, right? I mean, that kind of is a natural evolution of, as you add in these things, there's changing cost prices. But it improves network resiliency, increases that redundancy, hits a lot of sort of the R's that has come out of some of the force doctrine out of U.S. Space Force and other allied partners. And so let's look a little bit about what that technology looks like. There's some very big trends that we're seeing. And again, this is all being driven on the government side by ISR demands that are on the rise. Operations require robust real-time collaboration. during COVID, all of us kind of switched to online collaborative processes, whether or not that's, SharePoint or Teams or Zoom or Slack or, you name some online platform. I think we all have experience on it. That is no different than what government military operations are doing or looking to deploy, right? They're looking to bring those best practices from kind of the terrestrial world, deploy that across their architecture, and bring those kinds of at the desk or at the office experience out into the field, out into the warfighter. So it's real-time video, it's text messaging, it's not just really for the civilian workforce. And that really does put increased pressures on kind of this network complexity that we're going to be talking about. And deployments themselves are becoming more complex. It's really not just large-scale operations, go here, deploy from that place, kind of, do your missions in one central location. But armed forces around the world and kind of civilian response organizations as well are really focused on small, highly mobile expeditionary type forces, which does change the technology paradigm. Maybe you're not deploying with kind of a communications expert. You're increasingly relying on, the person that maybe knows how to, fix the website, but doesn't really know how to point the dish or fix some very technical problems. So that kind of barrier in technology complexity does need to match the expectation that there's fewer people that are experts that are getting deployed on these missions. And networks are not just being used for combat operations, they're whole of government solutions. And I think COVID-19 really kind of, put the period at the end of the sentence. We saw that humanitarian response organizations, humanitarian missions, the armed forces themselves, as they're deploying to the, for kind of response missions or mobile hospitals or, natural disasters, are increasingly relying on their kind of, combat networks, for lack of a more sophisticated term, to be used for kind of these civilian response organizations. The, hospital ship deployment in the U.S. was a good example where they redeployed some assets, some military capacity assets to enable those civilian response missions. And all of that just means more data to more places that requires robust requirements for connectivity across the entire government military market. So this isn't just a ComSatcom versus MilSatcom argument. This is a how can we bring the best solution to solve the problem that's in front of us. And some of that is destroying this kind of stovepipe architecture. You can see this diagram from the US Space Force Vision for Satellite Communications from January of 2020. And this is really kind of leveling the playing field, normalizing the architecture, going from, I have this, I can only do that, to I have this, I want to go there, I need to solve this problem. And really enabling the seamless roaming from any terminal on any capacity on any network concept, and what that means in terms of technology and the terminals and the hardware and equipment to really enable that. And the balance between commercial spend and military spend, at least on the in-orbit side, so this is, switching gears to the infrastructure side, about 46% of the cumulative revenues from 2019 to 2029 is spent in government and military. So as we're seeing more investment on the civilian side, SpaceX and Intelsat and SES and OneWeb and, you name it, everyone is moving and investing in new on-orbit infrastructure. Government military players are still doing that. So they're still investing in their sovereign capabilities, which means that service providers need to recognize and acknowledge that they have these very expensive, very complicated assets on orbit that they would like to use as a government military. So the seamless roaming isn't just solving the C to KU to KA band problem within the commercial side, but it's taking commercial capabilities and stacking them alongside military capacity to deliver kind of a seamless roaming experience, and being able to tailor what information flows where, what can flow to what place, what users need access to what capability and what service, and what users cannot have access to what service and capabilities. So it's really this moving fast into new acquisitions, new orbits across the enterprise. Now, 5G is a great buzzword. We all like talking about, the fact that our iPhones have 5G or Android devices are 5G compatible, but 5G for government markets is a tiny slice of that 5G pie. You can see kind of M2M IoT is a huge part of that bar chart. But for government military markets themselves, 5G is very transformative. It's not just kind of an access architecture. It's also kind of an orchestration paradigm, of way of thinking, a new concept, a new ability to kind of look at terrestrial and be able to introduce a lot of those things. So, seamless integration with other services, simulating new use cases, and really there's kind of profound impacts across the value chain, and government and military customers will be able to take advantage of that as well. Now, no conversation about kind of the future state of the satellite markets would be complete unless we talked about FPA, that three-letter buzzword that everyone likes to focus on. So flat panel antennas, kind of best typified by kind of Meta or Starlink. You can take your pick as to, when you vision a flat panel antenna in your mind, what that looks like. But the real question is can these new terminals unlock new values? And the punchline is that they're not really a magic bullet, right? It's going to depend on what the use case is, what scenario you're looking at, what kind of platform you're looking to connect, what your cost points are, what the overall network performance is. So there are significant investments and developments underway across the technology landscape in bringing these, cool new terminals to market. But that's kind of not going to be the end of where the story is. We're not going to just start telling the story, hey, we have FPAs and now we can do all these great things. It's just another tool in the toolkit. And government and military customers will be a key customer for all of these markets and opportunities. But overall, it's just this concept of being able to interact in this multi-paradigm, multi-ownership, multi-frequency regime. So kind of to wrap it all up and turn it back over to the panel, and Jose has some great questions lined up for us. The space and satellite markets are really on the cusp of a rapidly changing business models and technology. We've all been around for probably longer than we care to admit, and this is probably the most transformative time to be in the space and satellite markets. We're kind of smashing stovepipes, moving into kind of these anywhere from anything owned by anyone infrastructure and architectures. This kind of as a service business model is proliferating across all parts of the value chain, from kind of ground terminals to service provisioning to space assets. This connectivity from a multi-orbit, multi-band, sovereign and military, these very complex network regimes are not just kind of like notational diagrams in a PowerPoint. They're actually being implemented and they're being provisioned and procured. And there's lots of kind of, legal and business kind of infrastructure around supporting all of these things. ISR, MDR, C2 command and control, or C3 ISR command and control. I forget what the other C is, but all of these kinds of things are growing in volume and location in terms of generating data and distributing data and analyzing data and kind of acting on it. And that last point is that commercialization, software defined and configurable, are really the big trends underneath all of these curves. You name a market, software is really driving that growth. And that is true for the commercial side, and it is true for the government military side. So I think with that, I'm really curious to kind of dive in with a lot of the other panelists. I know, Jose, you're chomping at the bit to ask us some really great questions.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Brad, and got me thinking already. So lots of innovation taking place, complex world, software defined. It used to be that governments like the military would drive innovation and growth. So if you look at the internet, that came from the US DARPA agency. Where are we today? Is it the reverse now, where it's the commercial industry that's driving innovation that's now affecting how militaries are conducting themselves?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a great question, a great observation. And I mean, there's always going to be like the bleeding edge stuff that's very kind of weird and bespoke that will be the domain of government investment. Now, what we are seeing is there's this middle ground of the commercial markets have progressed so quickly and so fast, and the government markets have kind of stagnated a little bit, to be honest, on a technology landscape, that they're really looking to how do we acquire commercial capabilities, bring them into our organization, our operations, and let's start there. And maybe as we kind of test these services, we realize, no, we do actually need XYZW, can you build? So the government investment happens as another layer on top of commercial innovation that's already happened. I think the biggest revolution, to be honest, is not even in the technology. It's in a cultural mindset that it is okay to fail, right? That was a big thing that I think governments were really afraid to fail, because these are billion-dollar investments and no one wants to be on the hook for saying, hey, I tried an idea and it didn't work and I spent $1 billion in taxpayer dollars, right? That's like instant fire. But the culture of innovation has enabled or progressed to the point where we're going to say, let's try something, let's experiment, let's make a little tiny test, and let's iterate that test more and more and more, and maybe we get a deployed capability at the end. So it's really that mindset change, I think, more than anything.
Great. All right. Well, we'll come back to you for more insights, Brad. Meanwhile, we have a commercial player that's serving government military. And Alvaro, take us through what your company offerings are and what's your roadmap ahead.
Sure. I'm Alvaro Sanchez. I'm the CEO of Integrasys. And at the end of the day, we need to succeed. It's good, as Brad said, to learn from failures, but we need to succeed in our mission. So in this regard, we need a resilient network that we can work and provide connectivity in missions for tactical and reliable operations for ISR, situational awareness, control and command and control, with seamless and robust data exchange and increasing situational awareness. But nowadays, the infrastructure is becoming more and more complex. So before, I was thinking during the Brad presentation that satellites need to last for many years, and there is an investment in the space that can not change significantly. So at the ground, we need to innovate faster with software, as Brad mentioned, that we do software and we do innovate a lot in order to maximize the output of those space assets that we have, whether it's government or commercial, for government purpose. So there is a VSAT network, and as more we automate, less human factor. As more we automate, more success missions we are able to work on with different government agencies. For network automation, as well as virtualization and artificial intelligence, automating with known data and known missions results that we had in the past. This way, we can provide a much greater resilient network as well as available network in order to succeed on our missions. This is just one slide of few things we do. We do have tools for government, for network design, in order to have a reliable network design before anything is purchased, as well as for government communications providers to provide them with an accurate mission and an accurate calculations for their particular missions. When the mission starts, we are able to auto-commission the remotes to deploy much faster in order to have less trained soldiers in the particular missions, an army soldier that can deploy an antenna very easily, an inflatable antenna that we have in the panel. Also monitor and detect for situational awareness any possible threat, whether it's a satellite interference, whether it's a terrestrial pirate network, that we have tools for that. So, and also eliminate the interferences that might cause service degradation and might make the mission to fail. So by removing and cleaning those interferences, we maximize that success rate. So network automation is all you need for succeeding in government service delivery. And here we are, a partner that you can count on with. With this, I would like to give the word to Jose in order to start the panel.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much, Alvaro. I think you put it in a nutshell, network automation. So let's go to Victor Vega of Cubic, and then after that, Alessandro Caranci of Telespazio. So what do you think? You've heard from Brad, you've heard from Alvaro, network automation, complex, systems, lots of technologies on the forefront. Perhaps give a brief background on your company and what your view is on the how to be successful in government markets going forward. Starting with you, please, Victor.
Yeah, so this is Victor and work for Cubic, more specifically with the Gator inflatable satellite antenna that we've kind of introduced to the market around 15 years ago, and continue to work with some U.S. military programs of record with. So therefore, a lot of the stuff Brad talked about, I've lived and living the change in SATCOM markets, not from the services that are available to the terminals that can be purchased. So it's something that as a company, in my role, we're always looking at, all right, kind of what's next, right? How do you leverage what does exist, and how do you also move forward? So for us, that a lot of that means we're looking into multi-network or more specifically with SATCOM, multi-band, multi-networks, multi-orbit, and the technologies that will allow you to do that. As we talk to our customers, users, to kind of Brad's slide there, which was a quick snapshot of the U.S. Space Force SATCOM vision, where they're going from stovepipe systems to more integrated networks. You're going to need terminals to be able to swap from military to commercial satellites, which means sometimes different bands, but also in the back end, different modems, et cetera. So those are kind of some technologies that we're working on, specifically with the multi-band piece. And one thing that we still do leverage is our high big aperture antenna. As Brad said, flat panel antennas are the hot thing, and those are going to have their place. And at the same time, high gain has a place, and we'll have some place in some of these. That may mean, maybe more portable teleports. Maybe you can now, either have less teleports or transport your teleports and transportabilities. But that's kind of like what we're seeing, what we're moving forward is that multi-network switchability. And then with some of the stuff that Alvaro's talking about with automation. So one is, yes, you got to have, let's say, the RF components to be able to do that. But how do you automate that? So the user's not having to go in and manually say, I'm switching to the satellite, or I'm switching bands, or I'm switching networks. It's something all of us in our day-to-day are very used to with our phones, right? A lot of us don't even think about it, but you go outside, you connect to a cell phone tower, you walk inside, it switches to a Wi-Fi network, et cetera. And that's a lot of the stuff our customers in the SATCOM market is going to be looking for communications.
Is your company's offerings already there, or is it in the works and it will take months, years to get to, where it's supposed to be?
Yeah, that's things we're working on right now. We got some product releases kind of coming up, and not just within the Gator product line. Also within Cubic, we have a couple other groups that are working, let's say, integration with between 5G networks and terrestrial networks. Right? What I mean by that is, kind of landline stuff. So, without going too specifics on it, we've got kind of a project going on that's working with the U.S. military that it's a solution that they can deploy. They show up somewhere without communications, and the kit, so it kind of comes with different tools, will automatically look at what's the best path for the network. So there may be a SATCOM antenna, a 5G antenna, and kind of a internal Wi-Fi network, and depending on where you are in that bubble, it'll choose the right path to go to. And I bring that up because I know this is more about SATCOM communications, but we're starting to already see the blend between SATCOM and terrestrial and cellular, where a lot of that has to kind of integrate. And the users and the customers are looking for that integration and that automatic switching versus, oh, I'm over here with my cellular network and I'm over here with my SATCOM network. It's more about how can all that be one seamless in the background so the user can go get to what they need to get no matter which route it takes.
Excellent. Okay. Alessandro, what's your take and your company's offering?
Yeah, I'm the responsible for the satellite communication of Telespazio. Telespazio is a satellite service provider, is the oldest satellite service provider of the world. We are involved in downstream services for satellite communication and for geoinformation from satellite. Nowadays, our company has 3,000 employees within 10 countries. So we have a network of teleports owned by us in different regions of the world. And we provide services in SATCOM for B2C, B2B, but our very important slice of the market is coming from the institutional market, so mil and defense market, military and governmental market. So our offering is to provide services for for customers, but on the other side, we are involved also in the management, operation, and creation of satellite systems, in particular also in the military environment. So we are part of some of the most important satellite systems coming from some European countries where we are present. And this is more or less what we do. Basically, I have, let's say, listened with a very high level of attention of the market study of the NSR. And from my perspective, we can see some interesting data that will bring the way of being a service provider in the next future for this field. The first is that the highest slice of the market is coming from users that are in mobility. This is a very important point. It is something that is changing year by year since the past. The second is that as for the commercial market, are required always data rates that are growing a lot. And the third point is that based on these two things, it is necessary to open some silos and to create an environment that is interconnected. This is a challenge for the service providers. So basically, our main target for the future is to be able to orchestrate. This is our challenge, but in my opinion, is the challenge of all the service providers that are working in this environment. It is to be able to orchestrate among different assets, but maintaining always the two necessary requirements of the military market, that are reliability and security. So basically, this is our target. This is what we need to be able to do in the next future. And and this is basically what the main points I was thinking about when I saw this interesting presentation of NSR market.
Okay, well, thank you for that. You've trialed or are using currently Alvaro's Integrasys product, and same question for Victor as well. Is it helping you in terms of the challenges that you want to solve and the offering that you want to craft in terms of going to market with the military? Can you share your experience with the Integrasys product?
We are using, but we have two roles in using this. In some cases, we are operating our own teleports, but we operate also third-party teleport for institutional customers. But basically, the needs are the same. Basically, the need is to operate a system being able to, first, to predict problems. So it is very important to be able to manage the network, avoid problems, understanding that are happening, and moving with counter moves in order to avoid any problem from one side. And the second, to be able to keep back to normality the network without having a too big involvement of the people on the field. So it would be very strange if you are using unmanned systems and then you need to put people on the theater to put the system in operation, back in operation. Huh? So basically, these are systems that are permitting to reach this goal.
Okay,
and
so you're quite happy with the Integrasys product so far, I would imagine.
Yeah, no, they are best in class.
Okay, excellent. Same experience for you, Victor? Or?
Yeah, so for me, I use it from a user perspective, from from a person and product line that's setting up the field terminals, right? And from that perspective, it's all about simplification. It's things that, over the years, there's certain steps and stuff in setting up, let's say, a SATCOM terminal that you may have just taken for granted, and you just did and do because it's all what you always did. For example, just, if anybody's done set up a SATCOM terminal, the good old call to the teleport or the NOC. And depending on, which configuration you're using, you may have to be on that phone call a little bit more or not, whether it's checking your polarizations or your peaks, or checking your, doing a 1 dB power test, et cetera. It's allowed us to be able to simplify that. And what does that mean in turn? Well, that means two things. One, more types of users can use SATCOM. And for us being on the kind of on the military side, for our customers, that means that, well, you don't have to have always a specialized signal operator. So let's say you set up a SATCOM terminal in a tactical form. Maybe it's more what the U.S. military calls the general purpose user, which is things like one of the programs that we worked with stuff in Korea, with CSS VSAT. That's logisticians. That's people that are working a inventory system, or ordering parts, etc. But part of their job is to set up a SATCOM terminal so they can get that connectivity if they're forward deployed. Well, that's not their specialty. So by having automations like the stuff that Integrasys does, it's less about setting up the SATCOM terminal and more about doing their job. And that's, I think, what all these automation tools allow you to do, is let that piece of setting up the SATCOM link just be step 0, as I call it, instead of being steps 1 through 3, because ultimately the job at hand is not setting up SATCOM. The job at hand is doing something after you set up SATCOM.
Okay, so I suppose that very happy with the Integrasys product as well.
Yeah, it's allowed us to, like I said, automate some of that. Reduce those calls to the NOC, and for users that have not been familiar with SATCOM, be more comfortable with setting up a SATCOM antenna.
Okay, all right. I'll stay with you, Victor. So that's today, and Alessandro as well. So there's the Integrasys product, and I'm sure you're using and testing other competitors' tools as well. Is it enough for the next 3 to 5 years, or does Alvaro need to innovate to address certain things you're seeing on the horizon too? Victor, that's not here yet. Victor, what do you think?
Yeah, going on the kind of automation thing, I think it goes on to continuing to automate. So some of us that like to geek out a little bit on communications, we may have gone into our cell phones, and there's some settings in there that you can manipulate, the frequencies and the settings and the network stuff to connect to this tower or the other, right? But the thing is, most of us don't do that. I mean, the majority of us don't do that. The phone takes care of all that on its own, right? Whether it's roaming or this and that, right? Well, if you look at it, a lot of SATCOM today, especially on the SATCOM that has to be moved and set up, the kind of tactical stuff, you're doing that every time. You're playing with settings all the time, whether it's modem settings or terminal settings. And I think where the future comes in is continuing to elaborate on that automation. So it comes to a point where literally you open a lid, you turn it on, and that's it. It takes care of all that stuff. Some of that is already coming with on the terminal side with some flat panels, antennas, and beam forming and things. But a lot of that stuff is the software behind it to be able to do that and connect. And I think that's where products like what Integrasys is doing has to continue to evolve on that. So that way, SATCOM setups become something almost you don't even think about, right? It just happens. I think service providers have also done a great job as they continue to move. Alessandro kind of stated to this, move some of the tasks over to the teleport side or over to the service provider side. So the user in the field has to do less of it. And that allows, you have specialized people maybe at your gateways and things, taking care of things so users don't have to take care of it themselves.
Okay, well, you mentioned service providers. So Alessandro, what's your wish list for the future?
Yeah, in order to, let's say, to be able to maintain our leadership position or to increase our success, from one side, we are working on operations. As we said, it is very important to design, operating, redesign network in order to be able to predict problems, to improve the perceived quality of any service, and so on. The second point is to invest, to make huge investment on our teleports. The teleports will become more and more the interconnection point among different assets. In particular on Fucino, that nowadays is the biggest teleport of the world. We are investing in order to increase the level of security, physical security, cyber security, in order to increase the number of infrastructures that are connected, the number of rooms, the number of systems, to be able to fulfill at the best the new challenges. But the third point is also to invest on the store of space segment. In your study, basically, is highlighted that the next future will be a mix of systems, HTS, VHTS, constellations, and military assets. And Telespazio has already secured for our own store either capacity in military frequency and military assets, UHF, X-band, KA military, and fantastic sources in terms of space segment coming from VHTS and constellations. So basically, we are investing in advance because we believe, and we are investing in advance for the governmental market. Because basically, what we have in mind is to characterize more and more our way of doing the service provision towards governmental users. And so we are investing a lot also on what we consider the right satellite assets for being a leader in the next future.
Okay, great. All right. Well, Alvaro, what do you think? You have Telespazio moving ahead with multi-frequency storage. You've got Cubic, having their own wish list. What's up ahead for your product development, and how do you address their wish list, so to speak?
It's absolutely great, and we are honored to support. There is a big investment in both government areas in North America as well as in Europe coming along, and there will be demand for those investments that Telespazio is addressing. And regarding the Victor requirement that we just received, we are very pleased that we have a new link budget tool for calculating link budgets on the fly, and perhaps choosing satellites, choosing networks on the fly. So this would be a good way to automate and to work together more in the future. We are very happy to address that, as well as the iPhone today is now a very smart machine, very flexible, very smart machine that makes our life much easier. And that's what we're doing with our tools. We just patent a new technology for flat panel antennas or auto-acquire antennas, whether it's a land, mobile, whether it's a maritime, aero, for auto-commissioning itself without a human touch. So it's a no-touch commissioning. So this is revolutionary in that regard, and it's available since later last year, and with just 4 commands on a RESTful API. So we are looking ahead with the GEO, ahead with the LEO, whether regardless of the frequency band, from UHF to KA or to Q and V. So because the demand is coming with different requirements, and as a software company and automation company, we need to be flexible, gather all these requirements, and customize a solution that fits all.
Okay, So there's terrestrial integration, multi-frequency integration, automation. I think as Brad will attest, militaries like to have their own proprietary systems, MUOS, WGS, etc. Is this on your roadmap as well? So you have commercial industry, you have terrestrial, and then you have proprietary military. Is that in the works as well?
Yes. So we have a team of people that just do customization for our users, whether it's a government proprietary technology, just customization for that particular user and requirements. So this is a work we have, and we have certified personnel with clearances in order to address that in many cases.
Is that the most challenging of the puzzle, the government puzzle? So you've got terrestrial integration that Victor wants. You've got multi-band LEO multi-orbit systems that Alessandro wants, and then you've got proprietary satellites. What's the most complex of the three?
I guess it is having staff that experts in one, the other, and the other. So joining that talent would be what I think it's one of the most complex tasks, and making them to work as a team. So this is something that challenge us. But we work, for example, we did the other day another exercise on finding, as I mentioned, pirate cells in 4G and 5G in shipping vessels. Sorry, in vessels from government vessels from the Marines, and detecting when they were passing through pirate zones and pirate networks, and nothing with satellite. But when you join a network, it's just a pipe. So it can go terrestrial, can go satellite, or even different type of bands. Yeah, this is something important. Security is important, as Alessandro mentioned.
Okay. Brad, I want to put you in the spot here. So it seems that they're all aligned, right? Victor, Alvaro, Alessandro are all aligned. They seem to know, okay, this is where we are today. This is where we need to go in the future. And they all understand each other. Alvaro is serving, the entire ecosystem, and Victor is playing his part, and Alessandro is playing his part as well. Are they missing something, or is this the complete picture for Gov military going forward?
I mean, I think it really is the vision, right? If you look at a lot of kind of the new conversations that are coming out, it is, I want to do anything, anywhere, anytime. And I think, like Victor really mentioned, it's this, I need to pick up, move, and leave. And, Alessandro said the same thing of, I need to pick up, move, leave, reset, pick up, move, leave, reset. And the iterative time of how that is happening is accelerating. I'm going to be here for, it used to be I'm going to be here for 3 months, I'm going to be here for 3 years, I'm going to be here for whatever. Now it's, I'm going to be here for an hour. I need to do my mission. And my mission really isn't set up the terminal. My mission is like, make sure I can order lunch, or make sure that I can order new tires, or order whatever. And all of that sort of stuff. And that's what we're really starting to see, is that companies that are investing in, I don't know, maybe like, I don't want to say like making things simple, because they're still very complex systems, but hiding the complexity behind easy to use kind of features and functions and tools, while still exposing that to people that are kind of communicators, like Victor said, right? Like, we can all go into our phones and kind of fool around and say, hey, go use this band, not that band, or go use this cell site, not that cell site. But not being that, building a system where that isn't where you start is really kind of where we see success. And service providers that are building those kinds of things, and software companies that are enabling those tools and features is really the future. And I think the future is, the future is here. These aren't like cool things on a whiteboard somewhere. Like, Alvaro doesn't have this kind of hidden away in a lab. I mean, these are things that they're doing right now, today. And I think, to his point, like I kind of maybe emphasize the failure, but through the failure you get trials and success. And that's where we are today, right? Is we've done all of these things, we've done the demos, and now we're in the succeeding part.
Okay. Got a follow-up question for you from Alex Goldman. And Alex says, does cost per bit of satellite networks drop more slowly than cost per bit of terrestrial networks?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And you know what? I don't really know, to be honest. So if we look at the fact that satellite networks have been so prohibitively, but just so expensive, right? I mean, we're talking thousands of dollars per megabit. And now we're talking maybe hundreds, maybe tens of dollars per megabit. And that's a pretty huge change, right? That's a really steep decline. But if you look at the terrestrial side, like we all have kind of some flavor of some terrestrial internet at home, and we've all been upgrading our bandwidth rates. So if I look on a per megabit basis for what I pay, I mean, it's like pennies, right? And maybe, when I first, bought my house 10, 15 years ago, maybe it was like dollars. So the rate of declines are probably the similar. Now, the raw magnitude and where we end up, that's very different still.
Okay. Does it matter for government military markets, though, to be in line with terrestrial, or there's such a specialized customer base that they can take, the premium? It should take the premium.
I think the better way to think about that question is, are there inherent customer requirements that dictate a different price? And I think the answer is most definitely yes. Cybersecurity being the first one. Alvaro mentioned something very specifically of cleared personnel, right? Those people aren't cheap, and those people have very sophisticated skill sets in order to just physically get into the room to have the conversation. You don't have that really on the commercial markets, right? You can kind of get anybody really that can walk into the room and solve this problem. And here, no, you have very sophisticated people that understand very specific use cases. And I think that's what we start to see. People that are making those investments and understanding those dynamics appreciate that there is maybe an inherent reason why this bearing is here or that bearing is there, or why, to Victor's product line, why this is made out of this material and not that material, right? Because it needs to get airdropped out of a C-130, right? Like you're not going to have a commercial use case where somebody's going to throw a SATCOM terminal out the back of an airplane. That's just not a thing.
Okay, great. All right. So if I'm reading everyone correctly, the government military landscape, it's not a secret. You know what needs to be done. You know what needs to be integrated. And the four of you are sort of echoing each other's thoughts. So if the four of you are aligned, then all competitors know what they need to do, right? So it gets to the competitive question. So let's start with Victor. How do you differentiate and position your company so that you beat your competitors into becoming successful, title of our webinar, into delivering government services?
Yeah, I'll just answer with one thing we're doing right now. So I talked a little bit about new innovations, new product lines, but let me talk really quick on how do you leverage existing stuff. So in a market that's changing. So, for example, we've got parabolic type terminals. They are inflatable, but in the 1.2, 2.4 meter, 4 meter range, right? Those are kind of our three main sizes. Well, 15 years ago, based on, call it a standard geo, right? So you needed that 2.4 meter to even close certain links as a node, just as a terminal node. With HTS, with better bandwidth up in the sky, et cetera, right? It's almost like the sizes shift down, right? Now your 2.4 could be a hub, could be a terminal hub. Your 1.2 meter can do what your 2.4 used to do, let's say on an HTS network, right? The way it's sized, et cetera. Sometimes a 2.4 doesn't buy you, 2.4 meter antenna doesn't buy you any more than the 1.2 meter does. Which also then opens the market for things like flat panels, right? Sub 1 meter type performance antennas, where in the past it was prohibitive to even use, now you can. So where I'm getting at is also rethinking even old tools in new markets. How can you repurpose something that was used for something else for now something new? And that's like one thing we're doing with our biggest thing has always been, big performance, small size. And that's what we're looking at right now. We're working with the Marine Corps on some of that, where where some of the requirements in the past, required, let's say, a 4-meter antenna because they still set up like in theater hubs and stuff. And then, as we talk to them, because of the things service providers are doing, we're showing them link budgets to show that, hey, you don't need that big antenna anymore. You can actually get the same mission and performance you're looking for with smaller apertures because of what HTS is doing, because of what the capacity that different satellite providers are now offering.
Okay.
And which in turn means lower costs for them on the terminals they have choices for. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's the follow-up question. So in terms of cost for the service provider, makes sense. From your end, and when we look at commercial markets, when you talk about antennas, price is always being brought up. Does that matter for government markets, military markets, or what's your pricing strategy there?
Yeah, I mean, it matters from a bigger picture. The more that they spend on terminals, the less bandwidth or vice versa, right? They can get or other things they can do, right? It's all kind of from that perspective. So that's something we're very sensitive of, and one thing that I see shifting potentially, it hasn't happened yet necessarily, but as more commercial offerings are out there, and what I mean from a managed service or even SATCOM as a service, us terminal providers may be even shifting as to who our primary customer may be. And what I mean by that is, our military customers up to now have been, they buy satellite services over here and they buy terminals over here. But with some of these SATCOM service managed services, they're looking for service. It's like you and I walk into a, T-Mobile store, let's say, and we go ahead and sign up for a plan that may come with a phone or something, right? It's kind of that approach. So for us terminal providers, that may mean that our customer may shift to being the service provider. And that's how our products get offered into the market.
Okay. Just note for the audience, if you have questions, please type them on the Q&A bar and we'll get your questions. Okay, so Victor, your customer would switch. That would mean Alessandro will be your customer.
Yeah, right.
Okay. All right, so Alessandro, you know what Victor wants to do in terms of serving the military market going forward. What's the secret sauce in your strategy to go to market?
I don't think that there are some secrets. So basically, the only secret is to try to read a changing world and to be able to adapt yourself to the new world is. Trying not to love too much what you were doing in the past, but thinking that new challenges, new needs has to be proposed to the market and have to be applied in the daily operation. This is, in my opinion, what permitted to my company to start 60 years ago and to be a leader today in some of the fields where we are. And basically having a big attention to the tradition, but always watching to the new, to the next challenge. So basically we saw that basically we were all agreeing about what is needed by a soldier. A soldier wants to do the soldier. What we should have to give him are tools for doing its own job, its own role at the best. Okay. And in order to do this, we need to overcome some of the peculiarities of the satellite world. That was that if you are going to provide to a vessel a link, this vessel needs to host an expert of satellite. If you are going to provide to a soldier, to a defense, to an institution, they need to have experts for understanding what they are using. We need to become more and more good in permitting them to do their job, doing us their job, simplifying their operations, understanding more and more their needs, and being able to become transparent for them, hiding all the problems from one side. The second part is that typically someone says that consumers are really taking care about price, institutions are not. This is not true. unfortunately, institutions are becoming more and more, putting more and more attention to the value of what they are buying. And so you need to give them the best value for money. So basically, this is the other point where it is very, very important to grow and to grow fast.
Great. All right. Well, we're on top of the hour, so I know you all have appointments and stuff. So we'll go to Alvaro for the strategy, and then we'll have closing statements from everyone. So Alvaro, how do you outcompete your competitors out there?
So ease of use, it's one of the main things that we provide, much easier to use technologies, as well as more flexible to customize, as well as win-win situation we have here. And an antenna manufacturer and a service provider, we don't go directly to the government. We work with partners and we win together. So this is something that we always have in mind. So ease of use, flexibility, customization, and winning together for a successful mission.
Great. All right. So closing statements, gentlemen. Let's start with Victor. I think Victor has to go soon. Please. But how do you succeed?
Yeah, I think it's more things like what we're doing here, from a collaboration perspective, terminal providers working with service providers, working with companies that are doing integration stuff. In the past, you could have almost, as a terminal provider, you could develop your terminal and let service providers do their thing and almost not have to talk as much, right? Because you just say, yeah, as long as I have that modem, I'll connect. But I think as kind of going to what I was saying, managed services and SATCOM as a service, we do need to work in partnership more. And that just needs to happen more. I don't think it's happening enough. From terminal provider to SATCOM provider to a service provider, but also as an industry as a whole. And where I think we really get to some of this, multi-network things and, being able to go across different things is potentially some standards. And where I'm getting at is the cellular industry did this to survive, right? There's always kind of this thought of, well, I'm going to stick with my proprietary, let's say, waveform, for example, because it's my thing and it's going to make me money. But then ultimately the market gets too big that you won't survive by yourself. So therefore, in that industry, they started kind of going around the GSM, standard. And that's something that I see that SATCOM may have to kind of learn from and say, hey, what are some standards as an industry? So that way we all are in the same playing field and actually can collaborate even more and be greater than the sum of our parts.
Excellent. So partnerships, being involved in the value chain. Alessandro, what's your take? How do you succeed?
I'm sorry, I was on mute, maybe. Yes, this is typical mistake of the pandemic. So I fully share the point of Victor. In particular, for a service provider, the perceived quality of a service is something that is affected by all the components that needs to be tuned and managed at the best. So it is very important that within our ecosystem, we are going to partner with all the components of the value chain in order to give better services. Before this will be made at a higher level, because basically maybe in the future there will be a request of standardization of the satellite communication. We are one of the world that has never requested the interoperability among different systems. This is an exception today, and maybe in the future will be changed. Maybe the virtualization will help on sealing all part of the same ecosystem. But basically, also I believe very much on being capable to partner with others in order at the end to give to the users the best service.
Great. All right, Alvaro, how do you compete? Closing statements. How do you become successful? Partnerships as well? And
serving users, serving our partners, and and trying to win together. Yes, that's more or less our aim, and how do we succeed and succeed with them with their service and their users in their missions.
Okay. And the partnership with Cubic, with Telespazio, using products, we do hope that it bodes well for you in the future. So Brad, putting you in the spot once again. So it's partnerships, standards, not working in silos anymore. Do you think this is the way to go, or something else
Yeah,
missing?
I mean, we've seen a shift from kind of least price to best value, right? I mean, those are kind of government procurement buzzwords, but we have seen that shift and that recognition. And again, this is all about the procurement mindset that we're going to analyze the entire system for what it's worth rather than optimize the cost for every little tiny piece and get a suboptimal solution at the end of that equation. So that is, I think, the mindset that we're really looking at. Can you bring collaboration? Can you bring innovative solutions? Can you bring innovative solutions at the front end and then innovative solutions during the process, right? Like you discover problems, can you work collaboratively to solve them kind of in the middle of the procurement process or execution phase. And that's really, I think, the keys to success. There's always going to be a focus on price. There's always going to be a focus on delivering more bits. There's always going to be you need to protect my bits more than you protect those bits, all that kind of stuff. Those haven't changed. But this culture of innovation, collaboration, is definitely kind of weeding out the winners and losers.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen, for this really exciting webinar. I hope the audience got a lot. I certainly did. Didn't get to the rest of my questions. I think we needed an hour and a half for this, but Alessandro, Victor has left. Thank you for participating. Alvaro and Brad, on behalf of NSR, thank you for hosting and co-chairing this. And look forward to more webinars with Integrasys and with NSR as well. And have a good day, everyone. And we hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much.